In the summer of 2003, a smoke that quietly began in the vast northern forest of Russia would soon turn into one of the greatest environmental disasters the planet has ever witnessed. This vast coniferous forest belt, known as the Taiga, was one of the lungs of not only Russia, but the world. However, this lung would be choked in the merciless grip of flames in an unprecedented way in history. The fire started in mid-July as small sparks in the remote Irkutsk and Yakutia regions of Siberia. The region had not seen rain for weeks. The soil had dried up, and grasslands had turned yellow. Temperatures had risen above normal, and humidity had dropped to almost zero. The leaves of the trees that pierced the sky had become dry and brittle. According to experts, one of the main causes was the extreme heat wave that year and the drought triggered by climate change. But nature was not the only culprit. Sparks left behind by illegal loggers, campfires, and even carelessly discarded cigarette butts made the transition from spark to wildfire easy in such a fragile environment. At first perceived as a local forest fire, the event soon spiraled out of control within a few weeks. Hundreds of thousands of hectares were reduced to ashes. The fires were particularly intense in the Yakutia and Krasnoyarsk regions. Poor infrastructure, inadequate firefighting equipment, and a lack of personnel aggravated the disaster. The wind frequently changed the direction of the fires. Helicopters and planes that could be used for aerial intervention were either deployed to distant bases or were struggling with technical malfunctions. Villages trapped among the flames were evacuated. However, due to the poor transport infrastructure of the region, evacuations took days. People had to leave their homes, animals, and forests to seek refuge elsewhere. At one point, the fire had spread so widely that it could not be completely mapped even by satellite images. In some areas, flames reached heights of up to 30 meters. Trees were practically exploding as they burned, and wildlife fled in a panic. For most, however, escape was impossible. By the end of the fire, the affected area was determined to be approximately 22 million hectares. This was a larger area than the size of Italy. The burned region destroyed not only the trees, but the entire forest ecosystem. The soil was stripped of microorganisms, insects, birds, and mammals. Many species lost their habitats. Some endemic species became locally extinct. Even more dramatic was the amount of carbon released into the atmosphere by this fire. This single event caused about 400 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions, an amount equivalent to the annual emissions of some countries. This disaster, which disrupted the greenhouse gas balance in the world's atmosphere, became both a consequence and a trigger of the climate crisis. According to official data, direct loss of life was limited. About 21 people lost their lives in fire-related incidents. However, the health impacts were much more widespread. Thousands of people who inhaled the smoke for extended periods contracted respiratory diseases. Cases of asthma, bronchitis, and cardiovascular illnesses increased significantly. The material losses were severe. The value of burned timber reached billions of dollars. Settlements, farms, and energy infrastructure were completely destroyed. Yet these figures could not measure the loss of a way of life, cultural ties, or local knowledge passed down for generations. Some indigenous communities in Siberia saw forests not just as a resource, but as a spirit. That spirit rose to the sky with the flames. The 2003 fire became a wake-up call for Russia. Afterwards, various federal measures were taken. Firefighting budgets were increased and aerial surveillance systems were improved. Controlled burns began to be carried out in high-risk regions. Training local communities for early intervention also became a topic of discussion. Unfortunately, these measures were later relaxed. By the mid-2010s, large fires started again. The forest fires of 2019 and 2021 also destroyed millions of hectares. Today, one of the most effective measures against Siberian fires is the early detection of fires through remote sensing systems. Agencies like NASA, ESA, and the Russian Space Agency closely monitor the region throughout each fire season. Additionally, artificial intelligence-powered prediction systems help identify high-risk areas in advance. However, according to experts, the real solution is the implementation of global policies that will slow down climate change. Because, the Siberian taiga is still ready to burn, and each year the risk just increases. Today, more than 20 years have passed since the 2003 Siberian fires. Satellite images still show vast blackened areas. In some places, young saplings have begun to sprout, but honestly, it could take hundreds of years for the old ecosystem to fully return. The silence replacing the burned trees stands as a lesson. This fire was a mirror of humanity's irresponsibility toward nature, not just Russia's. Some fires are born of matches, some of carelessness, some simply of ignorance. But the result is always the same: loss, ashes, and a long regret. If you enjoyed this powerful story, don't forget to like our video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.